When the trio turned 19 and left high school, they hadn't yet murdered anyone. Their childhood antics could have slipped into their past if they turned their focus toward college or companionship. However, these particular graduates found themselves also near the pinnacle of their long road of grimace. The last fears to abolish: murdering and torturing people. Alexander had a number of jobs after high school, including a construction worker and a pastry chef. Victor worked as a security guard and went to a metallurgy school where he studied engineering with metallic elements. Igor never had an official job, but made decent money by using his checkered auto, a green Daewoo Lanos, as an unlicensed taxi. Months before the murder spree began, Igor and Victor began picking up taxi passengers and robbing them. Alexander helped with the robbery of 2 men in the taxi, but refused to help with more attacks. This was the only crime he would be convicted of. In the late evening of June 24, 2007, an off-duty police officer took a taxi to see his girlfriend and was picked up by Igor and Victor, who murdered him. The next day, Igor and Victor went out for a walk. Igor was holding a hammer concealed in a loose plastic bag. They soon realized that a perfectly innocent 33-year-old lady named Ekaterina Ilchenko was walking behind them. Suddenly, and without warning, Igor spun around and hit her in the side of the head with the hammer. The two then simply left the area while the lady died of a fractured skull. She had been having tea with a friend, and when she didn't return home that day or night, her mother went out looking for her and discovered her body at 5 a.m. the next morning. While the lady's body lay on the ground, only 2 hours later, the two boys committed another murder. A man named Roman Tatarovich slept on a bench not far from the first murder. The boys walked up to the vulnerable man and smashed his face with blunt objects, likely including the hammer. His face was unrecognizable after the attack. The boys only attacked people who had no chance of fighting back, which shows their cowardice. However, their brazenness was shown in the fact that their second murder was committed on a bench across the street from the public prosecutor's office. Always raising the stakes, Igor and Victor murdered 2 more people just days later in a nearby town. Perhaps they were trying to throw the police off by killing in a different city. However, just a few days later on July 6th, they cold-heartedly killed 3 more people. They had reached the top of what they were capable of, having gone through their own rigorous and evolving school of submerging emotions. Another victim, Yegor Nekvoloda, was age 21 and recently discharged from the military and staying with his parents. On his way home from a nightclub, he was attacked by the maniacs in the dark. Eventually, his mother went out looking for him and found him dead. A witness described the scene in the night. On the steps of the apartment building, a woman sat and screamed like crazy. I thought she was a drug addict. It turned out that was his mother. She found Igor first. After Igor and Victor murdered Igor, they turned the corner and found a female night guard walking toward them. Her name was Elena Schramm, and she was 28. Igor had a hammer hidden under his shirt, and as he approached, he pulled it out and bashed her in the head several times until she fell down. Elena had been carrying a bag of clothes, which the young men used to clean the blood on the hammer. Then they threw the bag away. They became known as maniacs because they were so thirsty for death that they were off to hunt their next victim as soon as they killed someone. Within hours, they murdered a woman who was the sole financial provider to her disabled husband and 3 children. Many more murders followed. The victims were in multiple geographic locations. such as multiple cities, on random roads, and in a forest. The victims were of various ages, nationalities, and included both sexes. None of them were killed swiftly, but by horrifying means. Most often, blunt objects were smashed into the victim's face, making some unrecognizable. Some bodies were never identified. Some skulls were smashed to bits. One murdered woman's fetus was cut from her womb. Victor's own mother described her shock. They first killed her and then ripped her stomach and took out the baby. I cannot believe that my son is capable of such a terrible crime. Talk of the murders consumed gossip in the city and neighboring towns, and police were under heavy pressure to solve the crimes. One police officer said, "Almost every day we find a new corpse. We have not slept for days and have searched. In a nearby village on July 7th, Igor and Viktor found two 14-year-old boys fishing. One boy, Andrew Sidyuk, was killed, but his friend, Vadik Lyakov, escaped and ran straight to the police, where he was promptly arrested. The police beat Vadik and denied him legal counsel in an effort to coerce a confession for the murder of his fishing buddy. Fortunately, Vadik didn't give in to the police, and they eventually believed the murder was a part of the maniac murder spree. Vadik told police that while he and his friend had been fishing, they were riding their bikes at the time of the attack. There had been two killers who stood on the side of the road. When Vadik rode his bike past them, one of them hit him in the temple. He fell off his bike but was able to stand up and run away. His friend Andrew lost consciousness as soon as he was hit. One killer chased Vadik on foot, then got in Igor's car to further chase him. Fortunately, Vadik knew the terrain well and was able to escape and hide until the killers left. Then he went back to find Andrew, whom he did find in a pool of blood. Andrew was still breathing and tried hard to say something to Vadik, but Vadik was unable to hear. Andrew could only whisper, and Vadik never knew what his dying friend was trying to tell him. Vadik took off his jacket and put it under Andrew's head, then ran off to flag down a car for help. The first car sped past Vadik without bothering to help, but another car stopped and took Andrew to the hospital, where he later died. With Vadik's help, the police created a sketch of the attackers. This was a huge development because before Vadik came forward, the police did not know who or how many people were murdering. On July 12th, a 48-year-old man named Sergei Yatsenko told his wife he was going to fill his motorcycle with gasoline and visit his grandchild. Sergei had recently retired due to throat cancer, but still found odd jobs to do around the house and neighborhood. He had not been able to speak for some time because of the throat cancer, but had just begun to regain his voice when he was killed. Sergei never arrived to visit his grandchild. The next day, his wife put up photographs of her missing husband all over their village. 4 days after the murder, one local said he'd seen an abandoned motorcycle and took Sergei's relatives to the bike, where Sergei's mutilated body was found. It isn't clear how Igor and Viktor got Sergei to get off his motorcycle, but what they did next is forever available for viewing on the internet. They videotaped the brutal torture and murder of Sergei, and a Google search with 3 guys, 1 hammer will pull it up. However, the material is extremely graphic. Sergei was hit in the face repeatedly with a hammer, which the maniacs kept inside a bag. They stabbed him in the eye and stomach with a screwdriver. The killers discussed that they could hardly believe Sergei did not die when the screwdriver went through his eye and into his brain. Finally, they hit him on the head to be sure he was dead. At the end of the video, they washed their hands and the hammer with a water bottle while laughing. While Sergei was being searched for, on July 14th, a 45-year-old woman named Natalia Mamarchuk was riding her scooter in another nearby village named Diyovka. When she came upon a wooded area, Igor and Viktor jumped out of the trees and smacked her in the head with the hammer as she drove. She fell off the scooter, and the two maniacs got on the scooter and drove away. Fortunately, there were several witnesses, including two children who had been in a tent nearby. The children gave the police a detailed description that was similar to the description provided by Vadik, the boy who was fishing and narrowly escaped his death. The police used the two descriptions to set up a task force of more than 2,000 police officers in the area. The investigation had been kept fairly quiet until this point. Police began telling the public about the suspects they were looking for and letting people know they were in danger of being attacked by the maniacs. The police also sent local pawn shops a list of items stolen from victims. On July 23rd, Igor went to a pawn shop and tried to pawn a cell phone he had stolen from a victim. Either Igor or the pawnbroker dialed the phone to be sure it worked, at which time police intercepted the signal and tracked the phone within minutes. Igor and Viktor were arrested at the cash register. Police then went to Alexander's home to arrest him, but for an hour and a half, his parents refused to open the door. Police and neighbors heard their plumbing pipes rattling as they flushed evidence down the toilet. The next day, police brought in a plumber who found 3 mobile phones and a watch belonging to the victims.